How on earth do you define success under Pat Fitzgerald? Well, let's talk to the guy that knows everything about things going on in East Lansing, the one, the only Graham Couch.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Spartans is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of all the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for making Locked On Spartans your first listen every single day right here on the number one ranked Locked On Podcast Network. Please rate, review, subscribe, comment below how you would define success within 2 years under Pat Fitzgerald, your new head coach at Michigan State. Now, we'll get into basketball here eventually. We'll get into what to expect for this upcoming portal cycle with the one, the only Graham Couch. But Graham, I need guidance here. I think a lot of the fan base needs some guidance because we're going to look at this in the same window that Jonathan Smith got here at Michigan State. 2 years. I thought by now that, Jonathan Smith would still be our coach, that we would be celebrating an 8-win season. Aiden Childs has blossomed as a quarterback, and the top storyline would be, hey, is he going to stay or is he going to go to the NFL? Graham, that's not how things are. We've moved on to our 27th head coach at Michigan State, Pat Fitzgerald. What would be success for Pat Fitzgerald at the end of the 2027 season? 2 years go by. What does this program have to look like for you to say, hey, good idea, J-Bat. You've done it, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll all know it when we see it. You know, you don't want to put, we don't know the schedule yet, so it's hard to put wins and certain things. But I think postseason, a couple of years would certainly be part of that. And I think in year two, a year where it felt like they were getting somewhere closer to contention, where it felt like they were in bigger games with good teams near the top of the league, where it felt like they weren't overmatched, whether they're yet ready to win those games. And I get that you can do things really fast. It could happen faster than that or not. And then some of this is sort of thinking in terms of a build, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I think still is some of that in most places. You have to kind of forget about Indiana and think about the rest of college football. And but I think you want something where at the line of scrimmage, a year from now, or 2 years, and then by the 2027 season, it feels like they can compete. Mm-hmm. And that's just not where they've been. And that would really feel like progress. That, to me, should be the goal, because once you do that, everything else becomes possible.
I like the way you took that. It's not just wins and losses, the amount, but you just got to see the physical brand of football, the identity of Michigan State football, which always starts in the offensive line, at least seep its way back into this program. And Graham, when I view, where we're going to be at in 2 years from now, my goal's a weird one, or you can let me know if this is weird for you. At least show up on the college football playoff graphic in the first week of November. And that could mean like you're 23rd. You're on the outside looking in. You're already starting November with, what did you call it, a 5-3 record, but you had a good win. You had some tough losses. Just give this fan base some competitive football and meaningful football to watch in the month of November in 2027. But I also don't like saying that, Graham, because that means that we're going to have to wait another year for games to be meaningful. Because I'm already bracing for 2026 can you get to 6 wins, 7 wins? Yes, but I don't know. Just like you said, we don't entirely know the schedule. We know the opponents. We know the non-conference schedule, which is against Toledo, against Eastern Michigan, at Notre Dame. Outside of that, your home Big Ten opponents will be Illinois. Who knows what they'll look like? Nebraska, Northwestern, Oregon, Washington. And then your road games at Michigan, at Rutgers, at UCLA, at Wisconsin. I guess, what do you need to see immediately in 2026? Is it bowl game or bust, or are you going to be a little bit more patient than fans like me, really?
Well, patience is going to have to come to this degree. Like, they're not going to get rid of another coach in 2 years unless something really unexpected were to happen. So at some point, you have a president and an athletic director who hired this guy. And so Pat Fitzgerald is going to be the guy, and the donor base seems in on that. And so you're just going to have – even if year 2 was not good, there's going to be a year 3, right? So it's probably just time for people to get on board. But yeah, no, I think it is tricky, because you think about 2026. Like, I don't think you have to wait to be – you never know how quickly an offensive line can develop. whether he can go get a piece in the portal on the defensive line that all of a sudden makes you just a little more formidable and changes things. Mel Tucker did not leave a great legacy at Michigan State, but he did say one thing that I've always thought, because he had been at Georgia and he'd been at Alabama. He'd been places that were at the time were winning at the highest level in a different era of college football. And he said you need 3 or 4 difference makers on both sides of the ball. And when you think about this team right now, what they had, by the end of the year, they really didn't have any on either side. Now, the Nick Marsh was at his best that guy, and we saw it occasionally. But you really don't have any of those. So can you add a couple players that do that for you, and can you start to solidify the line of scrimmage next year? I think it's possible, but I don't think people need to be. And I don't think people need to be overly patient. But I think what will help, and where Jonathan Smith struggled beyond the field, was his ability to sell his program and explain what was going on. And I think Pat Fitzgerald will be able to do that. And people, they may not be patient, but they'll be more understanding if you can do that. And I think that's going to be a big thing that Fitzgerald brings, that ability to sort of meet people where they are and communicate sort of the feeling that they have.
I'm interested to hear your, perspective on this upcoming portal cycle that's going to be kicking off in January. It's only one window this year, in case you guys haven't seen that. So it's going to be rapid across the country. But just like you said, you need 3 or 4 difference makers on each side of the ball. Michigan State, it's very absent, especially with Nick Marsh transferring. We're still at the time of recording in the Bays on Jordan Hall, seeing what he's going to do. But look, I'm kind of torn, because I do want to, throw caution out there that, yes, just because this mega donation came in on Friday doesn't mean that we're Texas Tech overnight. We're not going to ball out every single position, and that's for a few reasons. One, I still think Texas Tech is going to be one of the highest spenders. Michigan State, they've upped their floor for sure. I don't know if they're going to be spending that much. And number 2, Graham, there's so many positions that have to be addressed. You're going to have to spread out whatever money you have across a lot of positions. But do you think they can land that 3 to 4 difference makers on each side of the ball? Because let's not kid ourselves. Even if they do have a higher cap than they normally did, so to speak, they're going to have to overpay their brains out to get some of these kids over here to East Lansing. So I think it's going to be more of they'll improve in the margins, which is not sexy. It's very boring. But do you think that they could hit some more home runs in the portal than I'm thinking so right now?
Yeah, you do want to be careful with that. You don't want to be a perpetual overpayer. You don't want it, because the money runs out, and then there's pressure on that guy. And this one, especially in football, where everybody gets hurt. The idea that one person, you put all your marbles in that. I would. I am very curious to see what it looks like as well, and what the priorities are, and whether they're able to really build from the inside out, which is what I think the program needs to do. I think on the offensive line, there are some young, promising players on their offensive line. They need to keep those guys. Anybody they think has any promise down the road on the offensive line needs to be a priority. And then, they need to work to, spend at those positions. And maybe you do get somebody, a left tackle, where you just go out of your way and say, we really need this, or we really need, one edge rusher, and we're going to spend a little bit more here, especially if you can get a younger guy who may not be there yet, but you really, really like. Now, why are they leaving their previous school? And you're going to be in fights with all sorts of people. I think at some of the receiver position type things, you can find guys who are underrated, who are a little less expensive. The Omari Kelly type is a great example.
Yeah, sure.
Receiver is a diva position. Guys want the ball. You can present opportunity, and those that should be doable. But yeah, I'm like you. I don't have a great feel for how it's going to look, what they're going to do. Obviously, Pat Fitzgerald is not a coach who's bringing over with him 11 starters like Cignetti did, or even a number of starters like Jonathan Smith did. And so it'll be a different looking portal experience.
Plenty more to come with our guy, Graham Couch, but first need to talk your ears off about FanDuel, because, NFL Sundays, they move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. Look no further than that Monday Night Football game between the Eagles and the Chargers. Lordy, was the momentum swinging back and forth. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel even more exciting, though, guys. You're not just watching the game, you are reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment, you name it. Live betting is best when the games start to shift, like a receiver's getting hot, a running back starting to carry the rock a little bit stronger, the defense starts to tighten up, or one of the 17 momentum flipping turnovers that happened on Monday Night Football, guys. You want to be in the middle of all of this action. Don't just place your bets before the game or the futures that you could do after the game. Get into it in the middle of the game with FanDuel. And guys, go over to visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. It's FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. Also, if you haven't already taken care of your holiday shopping, Alumni Hall is the one-stop shop for all the Spartans in your life this holiday season, guys. They have the largest selection of officially licensed gear. We're talking all the top brands like Nike, Columbia, Champion, Yeti, New Era, so much more. They got gifts for the entire family. We're talking itty-bitty kids to the full-grown adults. If you need to buy people hats, they got them. Tailgating gear, they got them. All sorts of accessories and knickknacks, guys, they got it over at Alumni Hall. And if you're a Michigan State student or faculty member or a military member or a first responder, you guys get 10% off with a valid ID in the store. And on top of all that, you're going to want to follow Alumni Hall on social media or download the Alumni Hall app because there's way more special offers and sales in both of those places. So pop into Alumni Hall in the Eastwood Town Center in Lansing near the Apple Store, or shop online or through their app. And best part is, for every $150 you spend, you're going to get $10 in Hall cash to use for the next time. So grab that new game day look or upgrade your tailgate with Alumni Hall, your ultimate Michigan State shopping destination. What do you think is line item number one? I mean, I know that we've got weeks until this portal opens up, but what is it? Because we just did an episode yesterday pretty much talking, you need help everywhere on the offense, certainly. Defense is not much better. It might even be worse. So, Graham, you've just been hired as Pat Fitzgerald's general manager. First of all, congratulations. I always believed in you. Second of all, what are we hitting first? Where are you putting all your eggs in?
I'm working on the offensive line, and okay. I want to figure that out because I want Michigan State. If I'm the GM there, I want to be a school where that is what we're known for, right? I want that to be the thing where maybe it's even nickname, maybe it's even part of the above cap NIL process and whatever it is. You know, you find some beef farmer on the west side of the state that they do commercials for. I don't know what it is, but you find a way to make that your identity. And you know, when you look at the greatest era of Michigan State football that you and I have really experienced, one person was there for all of it, Jack Conklin. And, you know, I think there is an argument, and there are arguments the other way, that you could argue the most important player in the Mark D'Antonio era was Jack Conklin. Now, you could argue.
Very well might be, yeah. Yeah,
you can argue a number of different things. But there is an argument there. I would work to get somebody, and again, injuries happen. You've got to build better depth. You're not going to be able to pay for a million of them. But if you can get a couple offensive linemen that are, you know, one of the things I think could be important, depending on the offense you run, which I think is still something we're going to learn. You saw last year they bring in a center from Wake Forest, and part of the reason they're able to bring him in is he wanted to be part of more of an NFL system. So I would take advantage of, too, if you're going to run more pro style, take advantage of recruiting from rosters where you have talented linemen who aren't being prepared for the NFL. I think this is one of the advantages. It's why if you're at Michigan State, I still think what you want is more of a pro-style offense, more similar to what Jonathan Smith ran and Mel Tucker ran and Mark D'Antonio. The reason for wanting that is if you're going to build linemen, you can hear it from NFL people all the time. There aren't enough of good linemen because the college game doesn't turn them out because they play gimmick offenses which don't teach linemen. I think you can use that to an advantage in recruiting and find talented players that aren't maybe the most expensive. But yeah, that would be my priority, the offensive line, because if you win there, I'm not saying everything else comes together because your defense can be crap and it doesn't work. But if you win there, it'll be noticeable. It'll be different. It'll change the season and it'll change the program.
You saw how good Alessio was in that final month, and he had no run game to work with. Obviously, the offensive line is a big part of that. And that, what was it? 7 sacks the first game, 5 the second, 3 the next. He was getting his face mauled off, basically, and he still looked competent. If you give him just a decent offensive line, Graham. It's not like I'm going to book flights to Pasadena, but I think we'll be smiling in October. Dare I say November?
You certainly want to figure out what he is. He showed enough to be very intriguing as a player.
Yeah.
And if his superpower is what Connor Cook's superpower was, which is the ability to hang in and not get rattled too much by pressure, which is a rare thing to have. Like, I thought Connor Cook was going to make it in the NFL because of that. And I think he still would have made it as a backup if he had Brian Hoyer's personality, right? I think that,
sure.
I think that you only get two quarterbacks on a roster and they get a chance to be really choosy. And, but that is something that Kirk Cousins didn't have that, right? Kirk Cousins would get people at his feet and it bothered him. So if what you have in Alessio is somebody who's got that gift, then you want to see where everything else can take them. But yeah, if you can protect them, at the very your floor at quarterback is pretty high, and I think that's a good thing. And when you ask me where you start, one of the reasons you don't have to start at quarterback is because you know you have a guy with a pretty high floor.
So, I mean, you use the word intriguing, which segues right into this next topic. And I gave you this really broad question in the outline. Most fascinating thing that has happened the last week for Michigan State. Now, you could take that in many different ways. The way I'm going to take it and what has got me just scratching my chin a little bit, and I'm happy it's happened, like this is awesome, is that they got Alessio Milivojevic back. That's great. Cade Coffin, 4-star. He sticks with the class. You get some other great 4-stars too, like offensive lineman Eli Bickle, Joey Cottle, Eddie Whiting, Colin Campbell. He signs to the class. These great offensive pieces that are young, promising. But Graham, there's no offensive coordinator that's been hired yet. There's been no offensive position coaches. I'm not like saying anything salacious is going on. That's fascinating to me. I don't even have a question. Is that strange, or do I just need to get with the times then? Well, maybe there's NIL going on behind closed doors. Maybe it was just too close until signing day where these kids figured, might as well just jump in anyway. I'm just very intrigued with that, with no offensive coordinator being hired.
Yeah, well, I think there are a few things at play here. The first was, I think Jonathan Smith did his legacy well at Michigan State by the way he exited.
Yeah, sure did.
You did not see him burning the place down. You did not see, from every report I've had, it was, telling recruits to sort of pick the school rather than, who was going to, because he knew there was a chance he wasn't going to be back. Mm-hmm. And so when you do that, you set the class up for success. You're not lying to them. I think he was a decent man, and I think he cared about those players, and a lot of people like playing for them. And you saw that in the press conferences, and in the way that you don't see that all the time when a former coach is ousted, where there's Jonathan Smith was a topic of conversation, was thanked, was heartfelt. I think they felt like he probably didn't get the proper runway that most coaches do. And yet still they probably did what had to be done. So I thought that was interesting. And I think that speaks to the way he exited and probably some of the smoothness they've had with, players not feeling like they had to choose. I'm not in Jonathan Smith's camp or Pat Fitzgerald's camp. And I think that's really important, and that's a tough place to put a player. I think if you're Alessio, it's like, I'm a starting quarterback at a Big Ten school. Right. I was here for a couple of years. I got to prove that. And do I want to go somewhere else where I've got to battle and do it? He's shown enough that people would be very interested. I don't know that he'd have a lot of promises at bigger and better places. And then it's also possible that, I think there is a previous relationship, obviously, with Pat Fitzgerald, but they said, look, the offense you ran philosophically is not that different than what I want to run. Where the coordinator is. So, it's like there will be changes, there will be things, but it's not going to be a completely different deal entirely. And I don't know that for sure, but that may have been a conversation that was had. But yeah, no, I think the sort of the smoothness of the transition, the decision to bring Joe Rossi back, which is interesting, and may help with that continuity, because I think continuity is important right now, and it may not have been the greatest team, but it was a team that fought till the end, and I think there's character in that, and so there are a lot of guys you want back as you're trying to build a foundation.
More to come with our guy Graham Couch, but first, guys, need to talk your ears off about Rougiet. Now let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life, whatever it is, it doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rougiet Ready is designed to help you take back control. Now, Rougiet Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Now, Rougiet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 minute that dissolves under your tongue. It absorbs fast, guys. You connect with a board-certified doctor online, and everything ships discreetly right to your door. There's a reason why over 150,000 men have already made the switch to Rougiet, guys. If you've been thinking of the next step, well, now's the time to take it. Head over to Rougiet.com/lockedoncollege. That's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege. Again, RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. It's Rougiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. Let's talk basketball here because, look, there's a lot of great things going around Michigan State. They got 1 loss this season. They went 3-1 in that very tough non-conference gauntlet that they have. But I want to zoom in on a specific player here, and we've been talking about him and just how well he's done just developing his body control, his offensive threat, I guess for lack of a better term, and that is Carson Cooper. And Graham, as I was just staring at the ceiling last night, daydreaming of Michigan State basketball as one healthy, full-grown adult does, it kind of just dawned on me, is he, and this is also credit to Carson Cooper, but is he Tom Izzo's greatest development story like of all time? And you've had some good ones that stuck around all 4 years. If you want to go Draymond Green, of course, Goran Sutan, certainly a good option. But man, just from going this guy that was really not even rated as a recruit out of the IMG-B team to now a guy that's had more double-digit scoring outings this season than he did the 3 previous years combined. Man, I think that this is Izzo and, of course, Cooper's just finest work. Is there anyone else that pops into your mind?
Well, I mean, Kenny Goins was a preferred walk-on, right?
So that's a great one. Yeah.
There's a guy who hit the shot over Zion Williamson to beat Duke and sent him to a Final Four and had a great senior year. So there's guys like that. But Cooper is certainly up there. And I remember when they got him, and they were trying to make sure at the time, more than thinking he would be the player he's become, that they were protected if guys left in the portal, right? That they were going to not be in a situation where they didn't have, Kenny Goins, for example, played center a lot early in his career, and people hated him because and it was no fault of his own. He was just playing wildly out of position.
Yeah.
And so they didn't want to ever have to do that again. They wanted to be protected at that position. The player he's become, you could see elements of it early on. Like I remember a game as a freshman in Illinois where he just ran like a deer up and down the court, and you thought, the goods are there somewhere in there. And whether he had the hands or the strength or what his ceiling was, I don't know. But he is certainly, in his senior year, made a jump from his junior year that was farther than I imagined he would. And I think that's a big part of why MSU is who they are with him and Kohler inside. They become an incredibly formidable pair on the defensive end, especially, and on the glass. And it's a great story for him, and he's going to get to play basketball, whether he gets a test at the highest level or not. He'll get to make a lot of money somewhere for a lot of years because of it.
Do you think he's been the most pleasant surprise for Michigan State so far this year? And that's another question that can go a lot of ways because Jeremy Fierce has gone from a good point guard, and despite his 0 of 10 shooting performance, on the whole, I think he's a straight-up great point guard. Maybe I'm, just shining him up a little too much, but I think that's one candidate. You got 2 great freshmen, Jordan Scott, Cam Ward, that are already further along than I thought they would be. Certainly Jordan Scott. I thought Cam Ward would be a little bit more college ready, but especially at a position of need, that 2 position, Jordan Scott's also been a pretty brilliant pickup for the Michigan State Spartans. Who do you think is the biggest, pleasant surprise for Spartan fans so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, you can make the argument for Cooper a little bit, and certainly Fears has been the fact that he's taken his level to like that all-conference level, one of the better point guards in the country. That to change them, and it changes their ceiling. But to me, it is Jordan Scott because, first of all, they need it. We just didn't see it. He didn't take part in Moneyball because he had a bit of a calf deal or whatever, and I don't even think they, over the summer and summer workouts, saw this coming entirely.
Okay.
And sometimes that happens with a guy who's greatest early ability is just his tenacity and aggressiveness. And obviously he has length that really helps with that. But that stuff in practices shows up a little bit. But if you're not, you're not hitting shots the way other guys are. Like my sense, like Trey Fort was somebody over the summer, they really loved the way he was playing. And I think in practices that showed out in certain open gyms and things like that over at MSU. But he has a bit of, I think we're seeing he has a little bit of a ceiling at the high major level. The reason Scott has been very good. His plus minuses are ridiculous. The two games that they have been down to the wire on this entire season, Arkansas and Duke, were the two games he's played 26 and 25 minutes and 16 and 15 in the second half and had really good, plus minuses relative to his teammates. And he fits their identity so well. This is, to me, it's Jordan Scott.
Do you think as a whole, this team is already better than it was last year? And you can look at it just analytically. You head over to barttorvik.com. It says their offensive efficiency is 35th in the country, just like it was last year. But they've also gone from 6th in defensive efficiency to 3rd this year. Obviously, their three-point shooting's going a lot better. Their assist rate is 2nd best in the country. You've seen a lot of development from a lot of guys like Kohler's better than last year. Fears, like, is it safe to say that while they might not win the conference by 3 whole games like they did last season, is this just a better team than last year, you think? Can we safely say that, you think?
They've gotten good faster than last year.
Yeah, certainly.
So last year's team, it was really that game in Maui against North Carolina that they took off from there a little bit. And so they were better earlier. They're different. They're very different. Like last year's team had 4 guys who could handle the ball around the perimeter, much better ball handling guard situation, but not as much length on the perimeter. And I think that hurt them in the NCAA tournament. And that's an okay trade-off as long as Jeremy Fears is healthy. And I think, Divine Ugochukwu has to be part of things playing with Fears at times because of that. They don't have great secondary ball handling. But they're better defensively because they're longer and their interior guys are better. And that makes up for some of it. And I think they're a little bit better right now. There was a peak of last year's team, a few games, and having Jace Richardson, what that team last year had down the stretch in February was a guy whose greatest skill was getting a bucket when you needed a bucket. And I don't think this team has it. So, you can make an argument the other way. I think their length and defensive acumen right now makes them a little better. I think they got there faster. I am curious what their ceiling is. I think this team would beat last year's team in early December. My question is, will this year's team beat last year's team in mid-February? And that we don't know yet.
Right. No, I agree with you on both of those regards. It'd be a coin toss, like win 5 out of 10 games if they took place in, February or early March, like you said. But right now, I'd take this year's December team by 8 or 10 points over last year's December team, maybe even more. Graham, before we let you go, let's just really quick topic of conversation that no one could possibly care about. Let's talk about us, though, for a little bit, because holy smokes, it's enough to fire a coach and then hire the other guy 24 hours later. And then your basketball team's rolling. You got a hockey matchup that was 1 versus 3 against their rivals. And, that's right, $401 million donation. For those that make MSU content, perhaps for a living, you in a much more professional setting than I do. Do you like all that happening in the same week, or do you kind of wish J-Bat spread that out a little bit more? Kind of like keeping numbers sustained instead of like this giant spike. How do you swallow that pill that we took last week?
Yeah, I'm torn because certainly this week is a little dead. Relative
boring.
To last week.
This sucks.
But I don't mind a little bit of an exhale either. And it was exhilarating. It wasn't, it was a lot last week in terms of everything. November is busy, and last week was a lot going on, and it was interesting. And the fact, the one thing for me that, and this is again selfish standpoint, but the fact that the coaching search was not a long one. Yeah. And we're not checking plane trackers in the second week in December and racing around and guessing on things and trying to get sources on. That made it all doable. Like, it was a very clean week. It may have been a lot, but it was a very, this is happening, then this is happening, then this is this. And, would it be better if the Michigan State hockey team had a home game before the next 6 weeks? Probably. Sure. There are, Michigan State basketball doesn't play a high major home game until, the late in the first week of January again. So there are, there's some stuff that certainly calms down a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, I think, that's what we get paid to do, right? Is create a conversation out of things that just happened. And in some ways it's better. There was so much last week. It was almost too much to let each thing breathe on its own. And that's the one thing that's sometimes too bad is you don't like that donation alone. Okay. That deserved 2 or 3 days. And yet at noon the next day they were playing Duke.
Yes.
And,
right.
And so the Iowa game deserved conversation more than, whoops, but they just hired a football coach and they're introducing him and that day. And so it was, but I'm not going to complain. It was an eventful week.
So you don't miss the flight tracker at all, because I got to say a little bit of me is missing that. I wanted Twitter to conversation zooming in on Fitzgerald's wife's shoes at the airport and saying, oh, she wore the same pair 3 years ago at her son's birthday party. I know it's Fitzgerald family's coming to town. I needed that in my life. I'll say it. I needed some Zapruder film breakdowns from Spartan Twitter.
I guess that can be fun. The Mel Tucker thing with all that was, you remember, that was like in February. So it was just a weird time and relative to everything else. And so there wasn't as, right. I mean, this week you had like signing day on Wednesday, which is a ridiculous thing that shouldn't be on Wednesday. So there's, I did not miss that, but I can understand. I do understand. I enjoy the theater of it if it is on its own. And there's not a million other things going. If basketball isn't rolling, if there aren't other things to talk about, but I think Michigan State is better for having gotten this done quickly, and not that there weren't other good coaches out there and other decent options. They could have gone several ways.
Oh yeah,
but this seems like one that's got a chance to work. I don't think there's a home run hire today, but I think it's got a chance.
Well, we thank J-Bet anyway for having record numbers on Locked On Spartans last week. I like to think that it's just because everyone loves tuning into this show, but my God, there was so much to talk about. But hey, guys, even when it's not a crazy Banana Land week, thanks a lot for tuning in, for watching, for listening, and thank you very much, Graham, for giving us some of your time here in this very busy stretch of the winter right now. You're the best. Guys, you already know where to find them. Lansing State Journal, Couch, and the Rube Podcast. You're the best, Graham. Same with all the viewers, all the listeners. Guys, until next time, take care of yourselves. Love you all. Go Green.